So I'm Laura. I recently graduated in July from the digital photography program here at SVA. And I'm honored to be able to introduce my good friend and mentor, Raymond McCrea Jones, this evening. Ray's a photographer and filmmaker represented by Redux Pictures down in Atlanta, Georgia. And he is not only a wonderful photographer, but a great storyteller. And this is a fact that I'm sure everyone will see through his work this evening, and especially in relation to his new book, which he'll be discussing and presenting this evening, which is entitled Birth of a Warrior, 10 Weeks in Basic Training. So I'm really excited for that. I just got to see it, the final copy, which is right here. So Ray has far too many awards and honors to go through in its entirety, and I can't remember them all, so I'm going to use this sheet of paper right now just to give you a brief introduction. He is an alum of the Hearst Journalism Awards and Eddie Adams Workshop. He studied at UNC, and he's a two-time nominee for PDN's 30 Emerging Photographers. He had his first photo book at 26, first solo show the same year, and his first job at the New York Times that same year. It's a good year. So he left in 2011 to go down to Georgia and joined Redux Pictures, and he's been working on the book since then, right? So it's a long time in the making. Some of his clients include, oh my goodness, this is a long list, Time Magazine, New York Times Magazine, New York Times, AT&T, Time, Adweek, CNN, Outdoor Life, Wired, Atlanta Magazine. I could go on, but you guys get the picture. So without further ado, Ray, come, not stutter like I have, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Cool. Here we go. Thank you, Laura. That was awesome. I'm not going to talk about individual pictures because that's not really the type of photographer I am. I'm going to show some stuff. It's going to play through. I'm going to show some work that is, I hope will give you a sense of who I am. And then we're going to obviously show work from my latest book project. What I want to talk about is, I guess, you know, what I want to hear when I go see a photographer, I want to see the work that speaks about who they are, which is what I'm showing you. But I'm also curious to hear like the process and where they came from. And I'll tell you, for me, you know, it was. I often think that I feel very lucky that I even am a photographer standing here right now. Like I'm a living, working photographer, and that's, I mean, to me, sometimes I just wake up and I'm like, what the, how did this happen? I feel so goddamn lucky. And, you know, and the reason, I guess, one of the reasons why I feel so lucky is that I didn't grow up in an artistic household. There was a lot of things that were like, let me just say that I was born Southern Baptist, which is a really interesting denomination of Christianity. My dad was a preacher, and you know, I learned to play music early on, but I had no art classes, nothing, like, you know, like, but what's amazing to me is that, like whatever sort of passion that I have, whatever kind of talent, like I really believe that it was inside of me from the beginning, and I believe it's inside of everyone. And I feel so lucky that somehow something happened and that was sort of awakened and it came out, because I wasn't led down this path. I didn't have parents that enrolled me in art classes early on, but you know, it's just so amazing to me that I'm through all that I discovered this, and I still, like I said, don't know how it happened. But it's just, I think it's an amazing just privilege to do this job. I mean, it's simply put, I take pictures, right? I mean, take pictures of people. But deeper than that, I think I'm always a visual, like a storyteller first. No matter what I'm shooting, I'm shooting a portrait of 3 CEOs, like for a magazine. Like you can approach that as really dry, like I'm getting paid for this job, I'm going to do it. But for me, every single thing I shoot, it's got to be deeper than that. There's got to be a personal connection with the subjects that I'm photographing or subject. If there's not, then whatever I'm doing is meaningless, and I don't want to waste my time doing meaningless work ever. I don't care if it's advertising, if it's reportage, anything. It's got to have like a soul, and that's what I challenge myself to do with every shoot, because as a working photographer, the assignments you get a lot of times aren't like what you want to be shooting, but it's finding that balance and finding some way to channel that the overall energy and passion into making a great portrait that you feel good about, and that you feel represents the work that you do. I shoot a lot of really different types of things, and I think to some degree, some would say that you really need to be, like, I hear this a lot kind of now from like art buyers and like blog posts saying, you've got to be, like, talking to students, like, you've got to be the photographer for something. Like, you've got to be the something photographer, like, you have to be known. And I'm not saying that that's not a way to do it, but for me, like, I'm just so curious that I could never focus on one. Like, I could never be like the, I don't know, head and shoulders, like, portrait photographer, like, I don't know. You know what I mean? So my work is, it's kind of all over the place, but it's also opened up a lot of doors for me. I started at the New York Times, and this past week, to give you an example, I was in South Georgia shooting a really, really powerful story about a woman named Ashley Diamond that is a transgender woman, been living as a woman her entire life, but when she was sent to prison for a really a small offense, and when she got into prison in rural Georgia, they treated her like a man, and she was terribly abused. A really, really strong piece about this person's story and about the injustices that happened to her. That was for the New York Times, and that's going to be out this week. And then, like, when I get back this weekend, I'm shooting the Tomorrow World Festival, which is the biggest electronic dance music festival in the world. And that's gonna be super, like, magazine-y, like, the way I shoot it. And then I might, like, go, like, I don't know, have to do like a CEO portrait or something. So it's kind of my spiel, I guess, as far as, like, the way I approach the work that I do. I'll just say that the three biggest influences for me as photographers are Arnold Newman, Richard Avedon, and Magnum, just all of Magnum. And when I was a student, I would just look at any book that I could find that was photography, and because I discovered that I loved photography, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to practice it. I didn't know how to do it for a living, obviously, So, one thing that really helped shape my vision and even my, I guess, worldview as a photographer was looking at other work, established work. And, Arnold Newman's just exacting compositions, every single thing in his frame was just so geometrically perfect. And then, from Richard Avedon, I learned how important it is to see into the eyes of the subject in a way that was just really vulnerable and honest. And I think he was, like, the master of that. He invented that, like, style, that look of photography, right? That so many photographers have done. And then through Magnum, that was really my sort of reportage influence with photographers like Robert Capa, Martin Parr, obviously Henri Cartier-Bresson, huge influence to me. And so, it's really as as a photographer in general, whether you've been doing it for 20 years or as a student, it's really easy to compare yourself to other photographers in a way, and to sort of, you say, it's easy to feel like down about your work when you look at all this amazing stuff that's out there. But one thing that I try to always remember, and then I think is super important, is to know that like this picture right here, like it doesn't matter how good it is. I don't care how good you think it is, or I mean, no one ever will take this picture but me. I took this picture, and no one will ever take that picture again. You know, I was right there at that moment, in that exact spot. I chose that exposure. I chose the lens. I chose everything about it, and then I made the picture. And to me, that's so special, and it's so easy to forget that. When you're just out there, maybe you're like in the art world, and it's super competitive, and all photography is competitive. But if you can just focus on what you're doing, you know, at every moment, and try to be mindful of your motivations. I mean, it's something I talk about a lot, is being mindful of like your motivations of why you're taking a picture. Obviously, you know, when you're in the moment, especially if you're doing reportage stuff, you don't stop before every single shutter release and say, should I take this? But if you can just a little bit work that mindset into your approach, I think you'll become a better photographer, and I think you'll appreciate what you do more. Because if you know, a lot of times we tell stories as photographers that are really important. I mean, I don't want to, you know, photographers are really good at self-aggrandizing our job sometimes, and like, it's so important what we do, and it's like recording history. But let me just say that none of the pictures you take, like none of the stories you tell will ever be possible without the graciousness of the subject you're photographing. You know what I mean? Like, if you're gonna sabotage someone walking down the street and get a picture, I mean, that's great if you're Ouija, or, you know, I mean, if that's your style, but like, if you're shooting portraits of people, if you're taking pictures of people, you know, you're only there for the time you have because they're allowing you to. You know, they're opening up to you. And, you know, it's not like, I'll use the story that I just shot for the New York Times. It was a really sensitive story about this woman who was abused in prison, like terribly bad, and like extremely scarred. And, you know, when someone like that agrees to share their story with you, I mean, I can't, it's just, to me, I mean, not every photographer thinks like I do, but it is just so incredibly important for me to do that justice, you know? And it's yeah, I mean, and I'll also say that this doesn't just, it sounds like I'm talking about documentary photography, but I think it kind of goes for everything. If you really want to take your work to the next level, you've got to learn how to shoot portraits of people that feel honest and real. Even if it's a big production, you're setting it up, like you have to, I mean, it's not just you. I mean, maybe it is you shooting still lifes, that's different, but you know, there's usually, I mean, there's people involved, and I guess what I'm saying is that for me, and I believe, you know, not the right way to do it, but a very positive way to practice this craft is to do it in a way that emphasizes the personal connections that happen between the creator, the artist, and the subject or subjects. For me, it just gives me like that life and that drive to like keep believing in the work that I'm doing. If that makes sense at all. Yes. So here we go. This is my book called Birth of a Warrior. And this book, so as Laura said, I left New York like fall of 2011. And when I got down there, I had to start something. Like I had to I just have to always be like creating something. And I was sent down to this Army base called Fort Benning, massive, like thousands of acres Army base on a really random commercial assignment. And as soon as I got on the base, I was immediately like visually just stimulated, and in a way that was just, it's like going to another country, or like if you've ever, as a photographer, if you've been to like South America for the first time, like you see things differently, right? And I believe my goal is to learn how to see that differently, like all the time, when I'm walking down my same street every day. So when I went on this base, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I've got to go back and do something. So I sort of developed this idea and a pitch, and I pitched it to a communications guy that I had worked with on this, commercial assignment. And this book is about a lot of things. I mean, it's superficially a very documentary project. They look at these people becoming soldiers, but if you look like a little deeper and just sort of think about it, what the Army says they do is to take civilians and turn them into soldiers. This is our job, and it's like this military machine, right? But I was curious as to, okay, that seems like a really oversimplification of what happens if you're taking someone and turning them into a soldier. So I kind of wanted to see, how does that change people on a really sort of personal level? And I wanted to get in as deep and close as I could. And so I was embedded with one company of 162 men during basic training. And that, for me, was the best way to do it. I wanted to see, okay, I've never been to conflict zones as a photographer. I'm not a war photographer. I will never be. I don't want to be. But this kind of, like, we've seen all that, right, since the Vietnam War. Even before, I mean, we've all seen war photography, but I really wanted to look at, okay, where does it begin? I mean, where do these people come from? It's so easy to talk about, I mean, we do this all the time, and we hear it all the time, the military, like the military machine. It's easy to demonize the military, but in the end, what this book is really about, and this work is about for me, is just a sort of a reminder that things are always way more complicated than you think. The military is made up of like real people, like that guy and his story, and that woman and her story. And no matter how you feel about war or soldiers or any of that, like to be a more, I don't know, respectful, I guess, just person living, respecting what other people do and the choices they have to make. We have to recognize that, like, the military is made of real people, and they have stories that are just as important. So I spent 10 weeks doing this project, and so I drove back and forth from Atlanta like 3 or 4 days at a time, and photographed as much as I could. And this style of work, it was interesting because in an email recently, one of my reps at Redux, Ann Conover, said, I was CC'd on this email, and she said, "This is Ray. He's a portrait photographer who does a lot of really great reportage for personal projects." And I was like, holy shit, I never even, like, that's exactly right. That's what I am. And that was amazing for me to realize. I don't really know why I just told you that, but I guess that kind of describes what I'm doing these days. But so I guess my point is that this project is very different than the way I would approach most long-term projects, in that usually to develop this sort of intimate personal connection with the subject, like I was talking about earlier, you have to spend the time. I'm not going to just walk up to someone's door, walk in their house and start shooting, pictures. You have to, like, a lot of it is sitting down and talking, and I try to really get invested in the story, the person, like the story I'm telling, the people's story. I really want to care about the story I'm telling in their life. But with this, it was such a huge challenge because the nature of this work is that had to do exactly what I said I didn't want to do. It was basically show up on day one and start shooting. You know, because of what basic training is, I couldn't sit down and like, and pull this guy aside and be like, okay, let's talk for a couple hours, and you tell me, you know, where are you from? And oh yeah, like I really like video games too. And oh, I'm from Kansas. You're from Kansas? Like none of that bonding or any kind of connections happened. So this was a really hard story to sort of to navigate, because I didn't have what I needed from the photography that I usually do, which is that personal connection. So you know, it was a lot of I tried to, I mean, I definitely did my research, and I talked a lot with the drill sergeants, and I think that helped because they could actually talk to me. But the soldiers, you know, it's literally, it's 24/7, like all the time. And technically, another challenge from this project was that I was shooting like in really, really extreme conditions. So some of these field exercises that they do are 5 days long in the forest. And at 4 a.m., you know, in early 2013, it's like 40 degrees or something. And later in the day, or later in the 10 weeks, it's super hot. And I was shooting in the rain for like days on end sometimes. So that's just like a technical aside of executing a project. I mean, I went into this project knowing that it was going to be a book. Like I pitched it to the Army saying, I've got this idea, it's going to be a photo book, you know, and I didn't waver from that. And I think that helped me get the access that I needed. But that also, by setting that standard, I had that sort of self-imposed pressure to not fail. And I really, you know, when you do any kind of work, as an artist, any kind of artist, you're doing work and you're putting it out there. And I mean, that's always, I think, a very a vulnerable thing, whether it's like showing at a gallery or putting it in a book or having your pictures run in the New York Times. But that sort of pressure for me is a way to just like never get lazy with what I'm doing and to always try to be like on top of my game. So, I mean, I'm constantly studying like the work of other photographers. Redux Pictures has some of the best like reportage photographers working out there, and so I'm constantly exposed to their work. I look at, like I said, my three biggest influences are Arnold Newman, Richard Avedon, and Magnum. But they're like, I don't know, over the past, like, I mean, I've only been a photographer, like, I guess I would say 10 years, but I feel like the level of stuff that people are doing is just so, for me, it's just really inspiring. And I think that with a story like this, I guess maybe one of the reasons why I choose to do more reportage style projects and for personal work is because those are more solitary. Like I'm working by myself. I don't have an assistant, or you know, I'm not on location with a PR handler or something, you know. And oftentimes I choose projects that are challenging for me, or challenge something inside of me, or maybe very like emotionally just challenging, you know. And I think that's a way that I guess through photography I'm trying to figure out I guess, I don't know, how to live, you know. Like some people, I don't know, look at birds or paint or read books. The only thing I know how to do is to make pictures, you know, and moving pictures or still pictures. Or I mean, I would never walk outside and be like, man, I really want to just learn about the Army, so I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna look at these, I'm gonna just explore. Like having an excuse to tell a story through pictures has, I mean, I just can't imagine living without that, you know. And I hope that through this work, I don't know, maybe it'll sort of inspire you to do something completely different than what you do. Like, because it's really easy to, I mean, photography is huge. The spectrum of what you can do is huge. So my opinion was always that I wanted to kind of like try it all, you know? I want to shoot 4x5 portraits in the studio. And then I want to go like to Africa, you know, and do this story for an NGO. And like, I don't really care if I'm not the photographer that's known for one thing, because it's so personal for me, the work that I do. Like I said, whether it's paid work for a big corporation or whether it's something that I'm, you know, funding myself, it's still like a way for me to figure out like how I can, what I have to say, I guess, and how I can sort of, how I can sort through like everything that's happening in my own life.
That sign of the, is that a priest crossing? Be careful,
This picture, so what's going on in this point in the story is a field exercise, a multi-day field exercise, and what they do is set up these towns that are supposed to represent a possible conflict zone. And this one is Middle East, so this is a guy in like traditional Middle Eastern clothing. So like even the signs are in Arabic, and the structures are built in a way to look that way. And this is how they train. This is a very subtle picture that that I think says a lot about you know, I don't know, what it says a lot about what the military is and sort of where we are with that.
You want to take a few questions?
Yeah, I'm happy to do some questions.
Somebody have some questions? What?
Laura had
sure.
one.
I can start.
Okay, Laura.
If you want me to.
Yep, talk.
Okay. So you've this is your second book.
Second book, yeah.
Your first book being Faces of Straight Edge,
Mm-hmm.
and and
Keep going.
I guess this is Faces of Straight Edge was self-published.
Yes.
So how did you find the difference? I mean, this book was published by, forget what.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How was the process of
Yeah.
shopping this book around and
Man.
in knowing that you wanted to do this from the get-go? Like,
Yeah.
was it easier? Was it harder? Did you have way too many photos? Like, how was that process compared to
God.
especially
The
self-publishing?
process is daunting, like no matter what you do. I shot like something like 6,000 pictures over this time. My first book was completely independently published, DIY. I mean, we printed like a few hundred, or I don't even remember how many. And I'm super proud of that work, and I love it, and maybe it'll be like reprinted someday. But I knew that this time around, there was kind of it was 8 years since that one to this book. I mean, it was a long time, and a lot of things happened to me. I almost died. I had 2 kids. I went back down south. I knew, I made a huge career change, leaving the New York Times to branch out and to do more. So I knew with this book that I wanted to take it more mainstream for many reasons. One, distribution, exposure, the help. I mean, if you're self-publishing a book, you can totally get all the help that you can afford, but you're paying for it, unless you have, I don't know, an investor or something. But self-publishing has come a long way, and there's so many awesome little boutique publishing houses now too, which are kind of like filling in the gap in between self-publishing and mainstream publishing. But you know, I could have never. The first thing I would say was that I got a book agent immediately, and Lisa Eckes from the Lisa Eckes Group is my book agent. She's back there. She was recommended by a personal friend who I was telling about this work, and she was like, you know, I know a book agent, and so Lisa represents pretty much every like food writer or chef that you've ever heard of. That's what they do. Like, she has sent me probably 30 like vegan cookbooks since we started working together. So she's like, if you say her name, like around food people or food writers, I guess. Anyways, my point is that this book would not be sitting here without her help. She was my guide, and the publishing world is insane. It is insane, and there's so much the money issues, and just, I mean, I would never even know where to start getting my work in front of buyers at publishing houses without an agent. I mean, it's really, it can be done for sure. I mean, we have, in the photography world, we have very, there's specific houses like Aperture and all these amazing publishers. But, she really helped me navigate the process of, writing the pitches. And I mean, it's like a 2-year process, doing a book. But that being said, I'm super happy that we were able to do it in a way that you can get my book at a Barnes & Noble or order it, at Amazon. And for me, that was really important because I wanted this work to have more distribution and to get more exposure. I mean, for me, the way I approach, I mean, let me just be clear. I think that I don't want to be up here saying that, look at my awesome pictures. These are so damn good. Like, don't you think these are awesome? I'm up here as a fellow artist, right beside you, hoping that this is like a conversation and we can talk about, just the way we do our craft, But at the same time, I mean, I really care about having my work seen. I mean, it's as an artist, I want my stuff to be seen. When I die, I want there to be a catalog of what I made. I want there to be you know what I mean? Like, I'm very competitive by nature. I want to be good. I want to be better. But at the same time, this is what I made, these pictures. I hope you like them. If you don't, maybe next time you will. I'm going to keep just doing stuff. You know what I mean? This is what I've done, and I'm putting it out there. And so having a book just with the broadest reach that I could, that was my way of doing it, And I think also just the added pressure of knowing that it's going to be massively produced and out there, just like I said, kind of helps me just always push myself and not get lazy.
You were talking about that you like to photograph a wide variety of subjects, and it's kind of not on your mind to keep your work cohesive. And I was wondering if over time your work kind of naturally becomes cohesive in some way, like with, details or the way that you shoot.
Yeah.
And then also, are there challenges in being someone that likes to shoot a wide variety of things? Because you're right, you do hear that a lot, like, oh, you got to be cohesive in a certain way. So I'm just wondering what that's like.
It's a tricky thing because I think certainly as an artist, you want to have, I mean, I guess kind of like part of the point of being an artist is having a vision and a voice and saying something. And if that vision is not identified to your name, then what's the point? So, I think that I am striving for some kind of cohesiveness over the larger body of work, even though, technically on the surface, it's a portrait and then a landscape and then a studio lit portrait. I definitely want there to be some sense of authorship on this larger body of work. To the second question of the challenges, I think it's, I'm thinking of a photographer named Dan Winters, who is so much more than a photographer. If you don't know who he is, I mean, he's kind of like, when I discovered him, I was like, oh my God, there's another, I'm not in any way comparing myself to him, but there's another artist out there who does lots of different things, and he's incredibly good at illustrations. And he can take the best, emotional, moody portrait of a really, really, really famous person at the same time. I mean, he's just he's unbelievable. So my inspiration is looking at someone like that and seeing that he's found a way to be recognized as one of the best editorial photographers out there today. And he's always done whatever he's wanted to do. He's a true artist in that he just channels that creativity into something new all the time. So, you know, it's definitely the harder route to take if your end goal is being super successful as a photographer at, you know, I don't know. But, you know, for me, that's not what it's about. It's fine if that's what it's about for you. I definitely wouldn't judge someone who is just completely like business focused artist, creator, photographer. But for me, you know, that's not the end goal. The end goal, like I said, is that what I do is very personal for me. And this is just as much about me, like producing something that sort of informs my worldview and makes me better as it is getting paid.
All right, so I have a question. Because normally a lot of photographers don't really talk about this. So my question to you is, I know you used to do like kind of editorial photography for time and everything else, and now you switched over to this. As far as like when you're in the field now to compare when you were in the field before, how does your equipment or gear changes? Like with a project like this, what do you take with you? I know you don't want to carry a lot of stuff as opposed to before.
Yeah, I was talking with Laura about this just before. When I started studying photography, I went to this really small, like two-year technical school in like in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, and you had to have, like every student had to have like a medium format film camera, like on day one, and that's where we started from. Everyone learned how to color print and color process and everything. And so my technical, I got this really good technical background, and then I added photojournalism to that when I started shooting for newspapers and the New York Times. And so, you know, and I'm always trying to, I guess, better my sort of toolkit. You know, if I have a slow week or like even a slow month, I'm gonna be setting up shoots for myself to do if it's in my backyard, if it's in my driveway. I'm gonna take all the lights I have and like try to do a lighting setup that I saw, I don't know, Dan Winters or Nadav Kander or someone do, you know. So for a shoot like this, I mean, I guess to answer your question is, I've just learned to be very versatile with the different types of stuff that I can pick up a digital Hasselblad and shoot pictures in the studio or the field, or I can shoot with my Leica M6, and so for me it's really important to like kind of be very well rounded with different stuff because you know, I guess it's kind of out of fear. Like you get a call for a job and you need to, I don't know, you need to do, it's a little bit specialty and you need to get this kind of camera. Like I would like to already know a little bit about how to do that. For this particular project, I always shoot pretty light anyways, but I had one bag. It's like a 15-year-old Domke canvas shoulder bag. 2, 3 lenses, and a 5D Mark III, or like 2 5D Mark IIIs. I keep like spare stuff in my trunk, like in my car, you know, if something breaks. But yeah, I mean, a couple of my favorite lenses for the techie geeks like me. I shoot Canon, so for like this stuff, 135 f2 is like one of the most beautiful lenses in my opinion. I love the 35 1.4. And then, so I shoot like really light, and I don't carry around like the big 70 to 200 zooms, and just because it's just too much. And those lenses are white, and why is it white? So yeah, you know, I am definitely kind of like techie and nerdy. So like I have this Sony has really stepped up their shit lately, right? And so I have the A7R Mark II coming as a loaner to try out because like I may be jumping ship from Canon if, you know, I don't know.
So you like basically you prefer. Sorry. So you prefer primes over zooms, especially for like projects like this.
Almost always, yeah.
Almost
If
always.
I'm shooting, sometimes for video, zooms are more practical. If you're in the field shooting video, you know, like being able to zoom to a different focal length instead
Because
of
the 70 to
change the
200
lens.
is like the best Canon.
Yeah, I mean it's great, but you know it's really heavy. It's big, it's white again. So yeah, I mean I think it's pretty common knowledge that primes are noticeably sharper too. So as a sort of just really a perfectionist, I want to try to do the best I can with. I don't know. You don't know where these images, if you're going to have to, when you're doing a project, you don't know if it's going to have to be a billboard someday. I don't know, like a really big print on the side of a building. I always shoot raw. I always shoot the best I can, whatever I can do. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for sharing your work, and I really enjoy like the images in like the second book, and I see like it being like so valuable too, because in part of like the access to like the status of like the place that you have went to. So I'm curious in terms of like that, like how do you initiate, or how was like the communication? I imagine it would be like, since it's like the military, then
Yeah.
it would be a little bit like difficult, or
Yeah.
what are the challenges, or who have like helped you to gain that access? And the other thing that I'm curious about is what are like the limits of like this access that I imagine in this place, that like the pictures that you could have taken but you couldn't.
Yeah, your assumption is definitely right, and that it was very difficult to get access. But I'll say that one thing I learned really early on, and this is so applicable to anything you do in life, is to treat people as like as a real person. Don't burn bridges, no matter what like the person has done. Just walk away. Like these connections constantly come back. I was sent down on this commercial shoot that was totally unrelated to this base. I shot it. I worked with a communications guy at the Army who had to kind of escort us around, and I chatted him up, and I was just like a real, honest, like courteous, thankful person. And so when I got back to Atlanta and was developing this idea, I sent him an email and like just sort of pitched him the idea. And if I had been like, I don't know, ungracious, or just if I don't know, messed something up, or just was an asshole or something, he wouldn't have even read my email, and this wouldn't have happened. So I just emailed him back asking for a favor, saying, here's the idea, what do you think? And that's how it started. I mean, after getting his buy-in, he sort of navigated who we needed to ask. It had to go to the top, lots of paperwork, several months. But when they said, okay, and we had a start date, there weren't any restrictions really. I mean, I had to stay with this one company because I was embedded with just them. So I wanted to do that anyways. That was the focus of my project, was to just photograph the same people for the 10 weeks. But they didn't, there was no one there with me, beside me, while I was taking pictures saying, oh, you can't do that, or you can't photograph that. There were some legal limits as far as safety. Like I couldn't go in the gas chamber and photograph them. I couldn't like be in the field during the live fire exercises. So things like that. But there was no attempt by the Army to control what I was producing. They didn't even ask to see the work when it was done. They were just like, do this and put it out there. There was no approval. I was kind of like, when they said yes, I was kind of like, really? I mean, it's like, you're really gonna let me do this? Because I ask people all the time, I have this great idea, can I do this? And as a photographer who, I don't know, is promoting or going after his own work, you hear a lot of no's. But this was an awesome yes, and pursue your ideas. I mean, have an idea list, write down your ideas, but don't just let them sit there. Like, go after them. Yes, Izzy.
Hi. You talked about your style and your choices in terms of gear, and that's my question is kind of about your post-production and kind of but more on the conceptual level of when you're doing a documentary project or when you're doing reportage. to what level you aestheticize and kind of like where you see the line.
Yeah.
At like both from like a moral level, but also as an artist. You know, you're
Oh my
creating
God.
an aesthetic.
This is a whole separate.
I know, and I'm
Lecture
sorry. I'm sorry to
panel.
bring it up, but it's something that I've been asking myself, and I've asked other,
Well,
know,
it's so-
documentary
yeah.
photographers and documentary projects, but kind of, from the moral and the conceptual
It's
side.
so important. I mean, like the way things have happened, or the way things are playing out over the past few years with ethics and photojournalism and even beyond. I mean, it's like I don't know anyone who's not questioning, like, where do we go from here? You know, what are the standards? What can I do? What can I not do? So the traditional approach has always been, you can't do anything. I'm talking specifically like documentary world, editorial world, I guess. You can't do anything in Photoshop that you couldn't do in the darkroom. That's a very purist approach, and that's kind of the way it's always been. But I don't know, like, if you follow some of the more photojournalism focused contests, but like with World Press Photo, I mean, I don't remember the statistics, but a huge percentage of those were disqualified because of their standards. And then there was a lot of feedback from photographers saying, you know, like, things are changing. I mean, we have to sort of update the process. I mean, to me, I'm not a purist at all, but I definitely wholeheartedly believe in the not only the ethics of what I do, but the honesty of it, I guess, you know? I mean, obviously you talk about removing things from photograph or putting things in, that's obviously like, so it's dumb, right? But I mean, like, there are so many subtle things you can do now in Photoshop and Lightroom. I mean, Lightroom has revolutionized the way I work as far as batch processing. But I mean, this picture right here looks almost identical to how it did in the camera. I mean, I really save the retouching to the stuff that's not documentary, for the studio portraits, you know, or something that's more illustrative. Like, in my opinion, there's just no room for that in documentary reportage work.
Thanks.
Yeah. Welcome back here.
So my question was about the in-between process. He asked about the retouching the post, how far you go with that, especially towards your reportage work and your personal work.
Yeah.
The editing process, to me, is one of the most interesting things, because
Yeah.
you know, you can have an idea and a direction, you can go somewhere, but you take 6,000 photographs with an idea and then going through them and figuring out what
Yeah.
speaks to you and how that process works out for you is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so subjective. I mean, Marcel, how many pictures do you look at every day? I mean, like thousands, right? And Marcel's edit, if I send him work, is gonna be one thing, and I guarantee you mine will be different. It's not a right or wrong. But when you talk about a personal project that you have control over, and that's what makes these projects so important and special, is that there isn't an end client. No one sent me to do this. No one asked me to do this. I wanted to do it. I'm doing it because I don't care if anyone ever sees it. I don't care if the book never comes out. I'm doing this because I want to. And so I definitely want to edit it in a way that says what communicates my vision and tells the story in a really honest way. So the editing is grueling on a project like this. I mean, thousands and thousands of pictures, and I get very easily overwhelmed. So what I did was, I think after every sort of shoot, like I said, I would go down for 3 or 4 days at a time and shoot, and I would try to edit that stuff right afterwards, right after I got back to Atlanta and dumped everything. And what I would do is go through and do what I call a first pass. And I use Lightroom for everything, for archiving, for processing, and I go through and first pass, 1 star. And I just at least get that done after each shoot. And that'll cut out, I don't know, at least 50% of the pictures, because with this style of work, on this moment, I probably shot, I don't know, 12 images of this. You choose the best one. But then I got a friend involved whose name is Brett Rogers. He's an editor at CNN, photo editor. And you know, he was really gracious with his time, and we spent many nights at my house with, once we got it down to like maybe like 600, we had just really, you know, photocopied proofs, just printouts on the floor, the table. And I think that's kind of, for me, an easier way to do it. And we would go through and just, we use like sticky notes. And I mean, I really, really love that part of the process, that sort of collaboration with other people that I trust their vision, and I know they have sort of an expert eye, because it's really important to look at these, to try to see the work from not all angles, but different perspectives. And I mean, I can never see this picture for the first time again. You know what I mean? I took it and I was there and I know what happened. I need several other people to validate if this is actually a good picture, or like, does it belong here? Where does it go? Does it follow in this group of 12, where it has a very emotional sort of narrative in the part of the book, or does it, like, you know what I mean? So yeah, the editing is, as any photographer would tell you, like, you're always your own worst editor. Editing your own work is like not really a great idea a lot of times. So I definitely lean on friends that I trust, just to say, you know, I'll send them like a folder of images. Like, I think for this work, I also sent stuff to my friend David Walter Banks, who's now in LA, and just said, you know, give me your best whatever edit, choose your favorites. And then I really, really thrive on that sort of collaboration. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. To what extent, if any, do you incorporate text when you create a book like this? And if you did, how did you do that, and why did you do that?
Sure. You know, I mean, this book has basically an introduction and captions. As a photographer, you know, what's our job? Our job is to tell a story in one image, sometimes more. Every image is its own story. With a body of work, you're telling that story over many images. But I mean, that's your goal. That's my goal, is to tell a story. And I'm not really interested in this being a how-to guide to become a soldier. This is how you load a weapon. So I don't need that. You know, these are the pictures here. It's going to tell its own story in this larger context of this larger body of work. But, you know, I think I like the way that a lot of really great photo books play out, where the text is I mean, it's definitely incorporated in creative ways sometimes that help. But, you know, I was at the Aperture Gallery and Bookstore today, and I was looking at that Patrick Feigenbaum book, his new one from Calcutta, and it's cool. I like the way he I mean, he wasn't the first one to do this, but you just have a little number beside the picture, really small on the page, and then all the captions are saved for the very end of the book. And this is kind of a common way to do a photo book, and you present the story as a visual narrative, and if someone wants more explanation, you can go to the back and read it. You know, I mean, I think it depends on the subject matter, on the context of the book. You know, like, but you know, we had originally pitched this book, me and Lisa, for me, I was going to write some essays to go along with this, that were going to be sort of like, sort of my insight as an outsider, as a very, very remote outsider who had no military family or background or anything, to accompany this. But that's not the way it ended up. So yeah, I think it depends on the subject matter and the context. This book, like I said, is just really, really general, minimal captions. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to show the picture big and then underneath of it describe the picture in words. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I was thinking in terms of you're embedded for 10 weeks with these guys. Was it 10 weeks or longer?
Yes.
And so they tell you stories, you get to know their personalities. Some stories won't be in the picture. And I assume that was what you had intended with the essays, but you decided not to do that.
Well, the introduction serves as some of that, but there actually wasn't a lot of the personal stories because I couldn't talk to them. I couldn't really sit down. I mean, this is intense 24 hours a day, sort of, really hard. So, as I said earlier, it was a real challenge to not be able to have that personal connection or these insights, and it was it was like an added challenge for the pictures. I had to even go a step further in trying to tell the story through the pictures, and so yeah, if it had been different and I had time one-on-one with some of the soldiers, I think it could have been awesome to include some quotes or to record some audio, and I don't know, to do something with that. But yeah, it just wasn't possible.
A final word from your agent.
Yes.
I would just add that part of the reason there wasn't a lot of essays was the collaborative process, that the editor that worked with Ray on the book loved the stories that the photos told. He felt that he wanted more photos and didn't need the words because the images were so potent. And that's part of a collaborative process. I love words, and the photos that you gave us said so much. It really is true. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and we were able to incorporate more and tell a deeper story through those pictures. Each experience and each editor and each photographer will be different. And for this one, I think it was really the right decision.
Yeah, photo books are really expensive to produce, and you're literally, the editors and the people at the publisher are counting the pages, and they'll tell you, okay, we have 200 pages, and do you want to spend, 10% of those with some words, with essays, or do you need that space for pictures? And that, like Lisa said, it was definitely part of a collaboration, just figuring out what's gonna make the best end product to tell this story. How's it gonna work best? So, yeah.
So, on that note, I can still smell the ink.
Yeah, they smell funny.
Seriously, I can feel it now too. On that note, I want to thank Raymond for fabulous
Thank you.
presentation.